Let's go ahead and turn to the very latest out of Israel. Some really extraordinary, very noteworthy developments from the domestic politics there. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. So Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant is called a press conference and called on Netanyahu directly to reject military rule in Gaza. Let me go ahead and read you a little bit of his comments here. He said that he challenged him to promote an alternative governing body to Hamas's rule. He goes on to say, as early as October 7th, the military establishment said it was necessary to work towards finding an alternative to Hamas, emphasizing that the end of the military campaign is a political decision. The day after, Hamas will only be achieved by actors who replace Hamas. This is first and foremost an Israeli interest. Gallant said the military's plan was not flagged for discussion, and worse, no alternative was brought in its place. Military rule in Gaza is a bad and dangerous alternative for the state of Israel. According to him, such a decision would be paid for, quote, in blood and victims, and it will come at a heavy economic cost. Netanyahu responded to this, saying, after the terrible massacre, I ordered the destruction of Hamas. IDF fighters and security forces are fighting for this. As long as Hamas remains, no other actor will run Gaza, and certainly not the Palestinian Authority. Psycho Bezalel Smotrich, who's the finance minister, said, quote, Defense Minister Gallant effectively announced today his support for the establishment of a Palestinian terrorist state as a reward to terrorism and Hamas for the worst massacre to have been carried out against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Such a defense minister must be replaced in order to achieve the war's goals. That was Ben-Gvir who said that last part. So basically now, even the Israeli defense minister, Saagar, is Hamas, is pro-Hamas. That's the level of discourse that we're at. I mean, listen, Yoav Gallant has been in favor of total war and annihilation from the beginning. So now to, at this point, be like, oh, wait, you don't have a plan for the day after is preposterous because we're, just YouTubers. And we've been talking about this since day one. It was very clear. There was never any plan. The only plan was devastation and destruction. That has been abundantly evident. So you're just now noticing that. But still, the fact that he very publicly called Bibi to the carpet. This comes on the heels of the generals also briefing in a very similar manner against Bibi. Benny Gantz also took the side of Yoav Gallant here, siding, on the side of like, hey, you need to come up with some sort of plan of what's going to happen next. Now, of course, the Smotrich and the Ben-Gvirs of the world, they have a plan. And this is not speculation. They're out there talking about, we need to push Palestinians out. We need to fully resettle Gaza. That's their plan. Bibi has just sort of pushed this all off because to agree with them is to blow up the coalition on the more quote-unquote moderate side, and to agree with the quote-unquote moderates and whatever their plan is, which isn't even really clear either, would be to blow up the coalition on the other side. So all of these people are complicit in, the utter destruction and devastation and utter stupidity from an Israeli national interest perspective of the situation, but now they're starting to, play the blame game and try to throw each other under the bus.
I told you it was going to happen, and by the way, I went back and I found the full quote, and some of these are just amazing because they're saying it, in academic speak, but you can read between the lines. So here's one from Colonel Peter Mansour. He wrote a book on the surge. I highly recommend it. It's like an actual military history. He was chief of staff to David Petraeus back in 2007. Here's a direct quote that he says to the Washington Post. The Israelis in Gaza are committing the same primary mistake of the Americans in Afghanistan and Iraq, seeking a primary military solution to fundamentally a political issue. By pursuing the destruction of Hamas and ignoring the root causes of the conflict, the Israelis, by their actions, are creating more future combatants than they are eliminating. Inevitably, Hamas 2.0 will rise from the ashes of the current fighting.
And they already have.
Yeah, no, I know.
And that's
why they're playing the blame game now, because now they're like, ooh, this actually turns out it's really not working, and that our JV military is not particularly good at what it does. I mean, just today, I see the news, 5 Israelis, were killed by friendly fire.
Yeah.
They fired on their own.
And a number of others injured.
Yes.
They murdered their own soldiers.
They murdered their own soldiers. They murdered their own hostages. And not a single hostage has been rescued. I mean, which Palestinian is going to govern this place in the future? The only thing too is he's trying to get out of a military occupation. I'm like, no. Yeah, I want you to do it, because it's like, you're the ones now, you got to eat and reap and what you have sown from the future. And that's why the Palestinian Authority, the US, and the Arabs, nobody should bail them out of their own problem. They got to eat the cost of what they've done.
I mean, it's It's just that there is no answer other than horrifying ones from this point forward. Nothing that's actually on the table. I mean, ideally, Palestinians would be able to govern themselves and have their own state, et cetera, et cetera. But clearly, that's not in the cards. I saw even the Arab states at this point are just like, we need some sort of a statement that you're committed to two-state solution for us to like cooperate with you whatsoever. Even that is not even possible because Netanyahu is adamantly opposed to even pretending that that is something that he's interested in. He is dead set against it, has been his entire career, brags about it, has staked his entire political power and career on being the guy that is going to forever block a two-state solution. So yeah, every answer is a horrifying one and has been from the beginning, which is why I have no sympathy for the Yoav Gallants of the world or these generals or whatever. The military is they're the ones who came up with this plan for total war and all-out annihilation. What did you think it was gonna look like the day after? What did you think that was going to lead to? Who did you think you were dealing with here in terms of Netanyahu and Smotrich and Ben-Gvir? But it is incredible that you now have even, Smotrich basically accusing the defense minister of being pro-Hamas, which just shows you the utter insanity of the situation. For what it's worth, the U.S. came out and, backed up Yoav Gallant and said, we agree with him, there needs to be a plan, blah, blah, blah. It's just, it's sort of an utterly ridiculous conversation because it's been so obvious from the beginning that Hamas cannot be, quote unquote, defeated in the way that they portrayed from the beginning. The plan that they were, enacting, this total annihilation, which is devastating to the civilian population and civilian life in Gaza, was not a plan designed even to achieve that objective. It was a plan designed to achieve revenge and destruction. That's what it was, to satiate the anger and the outrage, understandable outrage after October 7th. But it was never about anything other than we are going to destroy. We're going to have massive devastation. And now, this is interesting. So there's starting to be all these acknowledgments from a bunch of American officials and even a bunch of Israeli officials that, you're not going to actually defeat Hamas. And latest version of this in the Wall Street Journal, it's both true and interesting that this is being put out there now. Put this up on the screen. So they're saying Hamas shift to guerrilla tactics raises specter of forever war for Israel. The Islamist militant group is using hit-and-run tactics and smaller groups of fighters to show it can fight for months, if not years. They go into some interesting details here about how Hamas has continued to be able to effectively hit the IDF and how, they were able to use their tunnel system more effectively than anticipated. They still haven't been able to get Sinwar, et cetera, et cetera. These are all things we've been talking about. But I think it's funny how they frame this, Saagar, that their shift to guerrilla tactics as if Hamas was ever like a regular fighting force. This was always a guerrilla insurgency, even as they were technically the government of the Gaza Strip. And so I also read it as a bit of cope of like, the reason we won't be able to defeat them is because they've shifted to these guerrilla tactics. This is no different than from the beginning. This was very obvious and very apparent. And by the way, you have given Hamas and Islamic Jihad and whoever else so much recruiting material that, as a social movement and as an appealing form of resistance to the Palestinian people, like, who do you think these orphans or these, kids who watched their brother or sister killed and their home destroyed or who themselves were shot and injured, who do you think that they're going to support? What sort of political ideology do you think that they're going to have? So in any case, that's the framing now is like, gosh. The quote here is actually interesting from this, the head of the Middle East and North Africa program at International Crisis Group says, quote, Hamas is everywhere in Gaza. Hamas is far from defeated. So that's where we are, even as they have gone into Rafah now. Remember, Rafah was supposed, this is the last stand and this is how we'll really defeat Hamas. Well, at the same time, they've had to go back into northern Gaza, Gaza City, Jabalia refugee camp, because guess what? When you left and there was just nothing but a vacuum, who else is going to come back into power than Hamas? Yeah,
and I think that actually another way to look at Gallant's comments is he's trying to bail out himself from the future.
Absolutely.
What the future will look, again, said all of this. what their military took in terms of casualties is child's play compared to what will come from actual military occupation. Look no further than U.S. military casualties in Iraq. If you're actually responsible for governing this place, you better gear up. You better have the best suicide bomb, you better have the best practices that you possibly can. And even then, hundreds of, possibly thousands of your troops are going to get killed. And this was inevitable from the beginning. This is not the way that they should have fought the war. But I want them to reap what they have sown, because they need to bear the cost. And a lot of this also is, I think, that they're trying to get the US and the Arab states to basically bail them out of whatever it will look like in the future. But I don't support that at all, because they're the ones, and I don't know if you noted this too. It's not just the military. He's like, the economic cost of this will be terrible. I'm like, you blew the shit out of this place. You're paying for it. But of course, knowing us, we'll probably bail them out in the end.
I just want a just resolution. I just want people to not be starving to death. I want kids to stop getting massacred. And I don't know when that is ever going to come. I mean, it just feels like there's no end in sight. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.